Someone once said that courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery over it. Nothing could be more true. Because if somebody tells you they've been in a serious, violent situation and were not afraid, there's one of only two possibilities. A, they're lying, which is 99% the case, or B, they're crazy. Everyone feels fear. If you can't control your fear, if you can't control your emotions under stress, you'll never survive. It's how you handle it and how you deal with it that matters. So what you have to do is learn that fear, in and of itself, is not an enemy, but an ally that you can use. As a matter of fact, when you're afraid, you're never more prepared to fight or flee. So fear is the one thing that will help you truly survive a situation. The hard part is learning to understand it. The edge weapon has cut and slashed its way through history as man's weapon of choice. For tens of thousands of years, the edge weapon was man's dominant survival tool and instrument of war. Then, seemingly in the blink of an eye, all that changed. With the advent of the firearm, man was now capable of delivering death from a distance. And at a distance, firearms have no equal. But in close, where most conflicts occur, and especially in trained hands, the edge weapon is still supreme. Hi, my name is Richard Ryan. By the end of this tape, you will have a comprehensive knowledge of the edge weapon, and more importantly, a much greater respect for just how deadly it can be. First, I think we need to define what we're talking about here. An edge weapon is loosely defined as any object or instrument that can be used to cut or to slash the human body. But that is a pretty loose definition. That could be a pen, a comb, a knife, an ashtray, almost any object with a sharp point or an edge. But what we're talking about is things that can be used for self-defense. And basically, they fall into two categories. The fixed blade, in which the blade and the handle are one solid piece. This is a very strong blade. And the folding blade, which is easy to carry and easy to conceal. Since you're going to rely upon an edge weapon as a tool for self-defense, you want to get the best tool possible. So what do you look for in a tactical folder? Well, it's quite simple. First of all, since it's not a fixed blade, we need a good locking mechanism. There are two types of locking mechanisms. There's a front lock, in which the blade opens up and a bar slides in behind it, here. Now, on a front lock mechanism, in order to close it, you press this, opens up the bar, rotates back down, secures the knife. Now, if the knife is well made, it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But some knives you need to be aware of, that if you squeeze them tightly, maybe under stress, it is possible to activate that locking mechanism, loosen it. That could be a real problem if it closes down on my hand. All right, so make sure if you do have a front lock mechanism that it's a well-made knife. The other type is one that I recommend. It is a liner lock. Liner lock is quite simple. Basically, it's a very simple mechanism that slides off to one side of the blade. And when you open the blade, a bar slides in line with the blade right behind it, forming a brace. It's the closest thing you can get to a fixed blade mechanism. So once it's locked, you have to actually physically reach in and slide this to the side in order to close it. Liner locks are usually very strong. But no matter what, whatever locking mechanism you get a strong one and get a good one. It's also a good idea to pay for a better knife. Cheaper knives have 420 steel. You need at least 440 steel or ATS 34. So ask the knife maker what it is. Some are stronger, some are flexible, but steels that aren't very strong lose their edge, they corrode easier, and it's much harder to retain a sharp edge on them. There are also two types of edges. One is a straight edge, and one is a serrated edge. Serrated edge is kind of like teeth cut into the knife, and it's used for sawing. But its biggest advantage in a combat situation is the ability to cut through clothing. Sometimes, no matter how sharp the knife is, a straight knife may not cut through heavy fabrics such as jackets, especially leather. So the thing about serrations is they grab a hold of the fabric itself and rip it. So that's the biggest advantage to having some type of serration. If you have a serration, place it down toward the cutting edge of the knife, low. Now, if you start looking around for knives, you're also going to see a lot of different opening features. Now, Spyderco has the patent on that little hole, and this one has a small mechanism on the outside that you can open up with, but you're going to find all sorts of variations. What's important about this is not really to worry about it too much. The knife itself needs to be opened up relatively quickly. It's highly unlikely that you're going to find yourself in a situation where you need to quick draw your knife. All right? So if you can get it out in a second, even if you have to open up with two hands, that should be fine. But personally, I like quick knives. So I like kinetically open knives. And what that means is there's some type of adjustable tension where the knife connects. And you can loosen or tighten that tension as you will. That allows you to open the knife as fast as a switchblade and not even have to worry about touching the opening mechanism in itself. Perhaps one of the most important things about a tactical folder is that you have some method to brace your thumb and forefinger, because it is possible that you hit bone in the human body. And if you were to thrust into the human body and hit bone, your blade will come to an immediate and abrupt stop. If that happens, for instance, if I'm holding this kitchen knife with no bracing, it's going to come to a stop, and then my hand is going to slide up the blade. One of those common and devastating injuries. All right? So what you want is to look for some type of mechanism where you can brace. Now, some of them have some serrations back here, some grooves cut into them, and depending upon the knife, you need to pay attention to the handle and the bracing mechanism and feel like you can hold on to this, particularly if you had to stab with it. Okay, so now that you know what to look for, let's talk about what to avoid with a tactical folder. You want to avoid cheap or poorly made knives. You want to have a knife that has good steel to it. You want to have a knife that has a non-slip handle, that has some thumb and bracing for your forefinger. And one other point. It's a good idea not to have a knife that says combat killer on it, because you're probably going to have to defend yourself twice. Once from your attackers, and once again from your attacking attorney. So anything that can denote violence or the fact that you may be looking for trouble is not a good idea. So a nondescript knife, simple knife, is better. Let's talk about the tactical advantages of an edge weapon. First of all, it's concealable, which means I can hide it easily on my body. But even if I don't hide it, and I clip it on my belt or in my pocket, still, most people don't pay much attention to it. And compare that to the attention you get if you're wearing a .45 and a magazine on your hip. So that's a good thing. Second, there's a psychological advantage to all edge weapons. We all fear them. As a matter of fact, we carry with us some primal fears, and one of them is being cut open or eaten. So when you whip out a blade, most people, most sane people, are afraid. And that's always an advantage in a self-defense situation. Third, the weapon is an absolutely excellent close-quarter battle tool. If you know what you're doing, it can be devastating. But perhaps the two most important tactical advantages of the edge weapon are the fact that it is a touch weapon and a multi-directional weapon. It's very simple. A small child could hurt you with a razor, which means that with an edge weapon, it requires no strength. You don't have to be young or strong or athletic. All you have to have is a little speed and a little accuracy. If you hit your target with an edge weapon, you're going to be effective. And it's multi-directional in the sense that I can use this weapon in almost any angle. I could be in a headlock and use this weapon. I could be on my back and use this weapon. I don't have to be in perfect balance. I don't have to have perfect biomechanics. Very simply, I can strike at almost any angle. But as with everything, there are disadvantages. So let's talk about the disadvantages of the tactical edge weapon. As a matter of fact, these are the disadvantages for every weapon, regardless of what it is. First, accessibility. I've got to have the weapon with me when I need it, especially if that weapon is the only thing I'm using to defend myself. If I don't know how to use other things, my body for instance, and that's the only thing I can use, I better have it with me, and I better be able to get it out in a heartbeat.
Come on, man. Give me your money.
Second, weapon over-reliance. It is my opinion that you can't rely upon any one single tool. That to be truly safe, you need to understand handguns, you need to be able to defend yourself unarmed, you should understand impact weapons and edge weapons. Because if you over-rely upon any one thing, Murphy's Law is always in effect. You're going to find yourself in a situation where that weapon is ineffective, and you've got to go to Plan B. So have a Plan B. Last, operator error. All right? No matter what you know, if you don't use it, you're going to be in trouble. So you got to remember that these are tools. I must use the tools correctly. If I use them incorrectly, they're going to be ineffective. So learn the techniques that we're going to teach you, learn them right, and remember them when you need them. Before you can do anything with the knife, you have to learn to control your balance. Without your balance, you simply cannot function. You've got to keep your balance in a combative situation. So let's start with a basic understanding of what balance is and how we can use it. Balance is a relatively simple thing. First, we've got the base of support. That is the distance between your feet at any given time. A wide base of support keeps you very stable, but you lose mobility. You can't move quickly. A short base of support makes you very mobile, but you can be knocked off balance very easily. To be effective, your feet need to be a comfortable distance apart, usually slightly wider than shoulder width. A combative stance is essentially a position of advantage, a position in which I can use offense and defense equally. We need to have a balanced position first off, because without balance, we can't function at all. So I need to keep my weight evenly distributed between both my feet so I can move in any direction I need to. I need to keep one leg back, away from my adversary, as a brace so that I'm not run over if he generates force against me. I use it as a brace leg. The rest of the stance, the upper part, is absolutely critical in a defensive situation. If I have a stance which exposes my knife, he can reach out and cut it easily. So I need to have the knife protected. If I have a stance in which any one of my vital targets are open for any reason out here, the same thing can happen with lethal results. The whole idea of knife defense is not to get cut, but there are times in which that's inevitable. So we need a position that gives us a maximum advantage. Now, there are a lot of ideas on knife stances and knife positions, but as in everything, there's always good, better, and best. I devise what I consider the best single defensive stance for knife combat. First, let's start with an understanding of protection of the midline of the body. In and around the center of your body are housed your most vital organs, your eyes, your throat in particular, and any of the vital targets down here. We must protect those targets. So, we're going to have to sacrifice one part of our body. We're going to take our left hand from our balanced and braced position, and we're going to face our adversary directly and bring our left hand as far up in front of our body as possible. We're going to keep this hand here as a protection. Remember, not only do we have muscle, but we have bone here. The bone protects you. So we got this I-beam in front of the center line of our body. Now my hand is up by the throat. Even worse case, he's going to have to cut through the bones of my hand to get to my vital targets. Position of the knife hand is also an important factor. If you extend your knife too far out or try to intimidate it with it, he's going to cut it, and you're going to lose the knife. If you put it too far behind you back here, you can't use it effectively. It takes too long to get out in front. So it should be in your front hand, but it should be tucked tightly underneath you where he can't get a hold of it, but you can attack in a blink of an eye. Once you've got a good balanced position and a good guard to protect your vital targets, then we've got to learn to get small. We've got to try to limit the target surface your attacker can hit. To demonstrate this, I'm going to use my chief instructor, John Hutchinson. I'm a lot bigger than he is, so if I stand completely upright in this position, he has the advantage. Because no matter how good I am, I probably won't be able to protect my entire upper body against his assault. Too hard to do. So what I'm going to do is get small, limit my target. I'm going to crouch down in this position, equalize his position. Now, I'm all bone structure in here. It's extremely hard for him to come out and deliver an attack. I can control one simple area now. So, to review the stance, let's take a look at the critical part. First of all, you've got to be in a position of balance. One leg's got to be behind you, and you've got to be able to move. Bend your knees. Bring this other hand up in front of you to protect your vital targets. Keep it up near your throat. Don't drop it even a little bit because he can get through with the knife. Protect your throat and vitals with this left hand. Keep this hand tucked underneath where he can't attack it easily, but he can use it effectively. Crouch. Pull yourself back. Get in a small position where you can function. And you've got a good chance of surviving. This stance may seem like a real subtle and trivial thing to you, but I cannot overemphasize how fast and dangerous this weapon is. Things happen in a blink of an eye, and inches can mean the difference between life and death. If I drop my hand even a small inch, the blade can get through and cut my throat, and I could die. On the other hand, by keeping it here, I'll take a cut, yes, but I won't die. Another essential point is where you put your blade. A cut to your arm or anywhere could disable you in one shot. One shot. So don't put your weapon out in front where somebody can get a hold of it. Keep it back, tuck it in a position which you can use it, but they can't get to it. This is obviously not something that you want to do with an edged weapon. We don't want to stand in close and exchange blows with knives. This is very dangerous. So, our best defense is simply not to be there. We want to keep as much distance between me and my adversary as possible. The thing about distance is, with an edged weapon, it extends my reach. So if you let somebody in close enough to touch you, you'll never be able to react. Even one step away is too close. So we need to keep 2 or more steps away, minimum, bare minimum. Remember, distance is your friend, so keep your distance. In a knife defense situation, evasion is your most important form of defense. But there'll be times when you're going to have to block. When we block, what we want to do is we want to countercut with our edged weapon. We don't want to expose ourselves. So a block is essentially meeting whatever comes out with the edge of your blade. Learning a complex series of blocks is usually too difficult for most people. What we want to do is deal with our instincts. Your instinct is to not let the edge weapon touch you. So if someone were to come out at you, even somebody untrained will probably put his hands out here in order to stop this attack. All right? Now, if we put a blade in the other hand and keep the other hand in protective position, essentially that's what we want to do. We want to reach out and touch whatever he delivers, whatever type of attack, just in a very light circular motion. When we make contact, we want to make contact with the lowest part of the blade, not high on the tip. Low on the blade allows me to use the entire length of the edge weapon when I cut and block. It's also the strongest point. An important point about blocking is to remember that your knife will probably never have an immediate effect on somebody, and you'll have to continue to fight. So in doing so, remember to get back into your stance position every time you extend your blade. Your eyes are your only connection to what's happening. So keep your attention on the weapon itself. We've got to pay attention to what's happening with the weapon moment by moment and second by second. Nothing else really matters at the moment. So pay attention to the weapon. It's perception, not focus. Let's talk about grips. Now, there's a lot of ways that you can hold the knife, each giving you some type of tactical advantage. But the grip that we're most concerned with is what we call saber grip. It's like sword fighting, but with a very short sword. What we're going to do is put our hands straight out in this position, 45 degrees across the hand, squeeze with the thumb and forefinger, wrap the bottom fingers in, and line it up with the forearm. Remember that the choice of the knife is also important. Try to get some thumb and forefinger bracing out here so that your hand doesn't slide up on contact. Once you've got a good grip, squeeze down tightly, but don't involve the muscles of the arm. Stay firm but loose. You're going to have to manipulate your weapon. The next segment deals with offense. We're going to talk about the difference between stabs and slashes. Essentially, a slash uses the edge of the blade to cut and open up a large wound. A stab uses the point to puncture and go through its target. In general, usually, stabs are more lethal because they can penetrate the body cavity and cause more damage. But that depends upon what targets you're aiming for. Whether you're having to attack in a self-defense situation or defend yourself, it's imperative that you have an understanding of both lethal and non-lethal targets with an edged weapon. First of all, potential lethal targets are the throat area in which we can cut any artery or vein, cause immediate blood loss, and the lower abdomen in which nothing is protected. It is possible to penetrate with the knife in any part of the body cavity, but as you can see, we've got some protection of the bone cage in the upper torso. Now, it is possible that the knife slipped through this bone cage. It's also possible that it hits it and does not go through. That's another reason why we want to keep our other hand up in front. Kind of forms an I-beam up here to keep our protection. We got all this bone in front of us to keep the knife from penetrating our vital targets. The head is also a vulnerable target, especially into the eyes. Obviously, you can't defend what you can't see. And if you cut the head in almost any area, it's going to bleed profusely, which also could be a problem for his vision. But essentially, the main targets are the throat and the abdomen, because we're not so sure whether or not we can penetrate the upper chest. It's also important to remember that inches count. Inches can mean the difference between life and death. For example, let me explain what I mean when I say inches count. If I strike into his throat in here, I've got a good chance of ending this conflict very quickly. The thing is, though, if he moves, say, 1 inch, drops his jaw, that's now a non-lethal target. I'm basically going to cut the jawbone. So when you're forced to attack, you want to go for the throat and the face area and the abdomen if you can. Those are the primary targets. In defense, we want to protect those areas. But there are other areas of the body that are survivable. Although almost any cut could be disabling, there are areas of the body which can be cut and allow us to continue to fight. For instance, any large muscle group area, such as the arms, the shoulders, even the back and the legs, we can take some cuts, especially slashes, into those areas. That's why we want to hide behind our skeletal muscular system as much as we can when we fight. It's very difficult now to get into those vital targets from here. So stay low, crouch, and protect yourself. As we stated before, there are two types of strikes. Slashes, which are done with the edge of the weapon in a circular motion, and stabs, which are done with the tip in a linear motion. It's important to also remember that inches count, so accuracy is critically important. Try to remember to be as precise in your actions as possible. There are so many possible angles with the delivery of the knife that you want to keep it simple and make it instinctive. Don't spend a lot of time in patterns, because what you're going to have to do is lash out at whatever you can make contact with. So keep it simple, practice as fast as you can, and stay relaxed. Accuracy is important, that is, hitting what you aim at with the knife. But precision is also important, and by that we mean striking with exactly the right surface of the knife at the right place. If we hit at the end of the knife, we're going to have a very shallow type of cut. It's not going to be very deep at all. So cutting high on the blade will deliver a shallow cut. If you cut low on the blade, near your knuckle, the entire blade surface will make contact, and it will be much more severe injury. The next segment deals with counterattack. An attacker attacks you, you defend, and attack back. It sounds simple, but it can get complicated. The idea is to do it as fast as we possibly can. The longer we stay within a person's kill zone, the more danger. So we want to get in and out relatively quickly and escape. Whenever you practice, always remember to wear some type of eye protection. Hand protection is also a good idea, but your eyes are critical. So wear some goggles that are effective. Now, when we're going to counterattack, it's important that we concentrate on keeping it very, very simple. We're going to deliver an attack and get out of there as fast as we possibly can. Remember, you don't want to spend any time in close with somebody with an edged weapon. So the idea is to cut and run, cut and run, cut and run. Deliver an attack and get out of there. Remember not to overcommit your attacks against an edged weapon. If you overcommit, you're likely to get counterattacked yourself.
The following material is a sample of some practice tips for the edged weapons information included in this tape. The makers and distributors of this program assume no responsibility or liability for injury. In practice, always use a rubber training knife and never a real or live blade. Always use eye and neck protection in conjunction with hand and forearm protection during your practice session. Watch the instructor demonstrate the practice pattern for angle of attacks. As the image of the instructor disappears, study the pattern left by the red light. You can use these images to practice and copy the instructor motions. But remember that this demonstration is not a mirror image of the strike pattern. Stand in front of the video screen and assume the defensive stance described by Richard Ryan. Watch the instructor make a one-step attack towards your position. After you study the instructor movements, begin making a single counter-strike to his attack. Then, move your body back out of his reach. After you've mastered that, begin trying to move off the line of attack to the sides and use multiple counter-strikes to the instructor's moves. Try to decrease any unnecessary motions, and also, don't telegraph your motions. This concludes the edged weapon practice session.
There are some very important rules that you need to remember about tactical edge weapons, and they're critical to your survival. Basically, they break down into two categories, strategic and tactical. From a strategic perspective, first, you need to always acquire your weapon before you need it. Attacks can be so swift and sudden that if you don't have a hold of it, you're lost. Second, use proper judgment in your deployment. Don't use this weapon unless you absolutely have to. Use it in a life and death situation only. Third, mentally prepare for the worst case scenario. If you're not mentally prepared, you're going to panic or freeze, and you won't take valid action. From a tactical perspective, you need to remember to cut anything that you can touch. Keep in your stance, back away, cut anything that you can get a hold of. Second, retain maximum defensive position. Don't drop your hand or change your position for even a heartbeat, because that's all it takes to finish you off. Third, never assume that anything you do will have an immediate effect on your attacker. Always fight until the fight is over. And perhaps most importantly, remember, distance is your friend. Use it. In closing, I cannot stress how dangerous and effective the edge weapon can be. We've designed this tape to be easy to learn and easy to apply in real-life situations. I hope you enjoyed it. Look for other tapes in the Gunsite series. You take care and stay safe. You must understand that if someone tries to attack you with an edge weapon, you will never be more afraid than in that situation. What you must do is feel the fear, accept it as an ally and not an enemy, and let your fear channel you into action. You must take action to survive. If you don't, it'll be over in a heartbeat, and you'll die where you stand. You must focus your fear. So spend some time thinking about that ahead of time. And remember, fear is your friend. Use it.